name is Andy with the E-Team, your Resource and Development Network, and we're excited to bring this eSession to you guys called Clean the House. And this is Mr. Jordan Darrow with Davidson Supply. And we really wanted to bring this session. Normally an eSession is a local workshop that we put together in your backyard to where we invite you out and we have kind of like just a mini conference, if you will. But finding ourselves 4 months into the COVID season and on all these uncharted waters, we decided just to film this session for you guys. And so I'm excited to be introducing Jordan to you, and he's going to have a lot of great things to say. And just to bring you up to speed on who they are and what they do, Jordan, can you just share with us, who are you, Jordan, and who is Davidson Supply, and what do you guys do?
Yeah. So first of all, thanks, Andy. Thanks for having us here, part of this eSession. And so Davidson Supply, we are a company that works in, an easy way to say it is the janitorial and sanitation market, Jansan kind of arena. And so the parent company that we work for also works with a lot of industrial kitchens, restaurants, country clubs, churches, daycares, that kind of thing. And so that's kind of our home base. We help all of those varieties of customers and accounts talk through what it is to sanitize on a normal basis, but in this season, obviously, where everything is heightened, procedures, products are changing, daily. That's kind of where we are in helping provide a guide to our customers through these uncharted waters.
So give us a little bit of, bring us into some of the conversations. You guys you're in the trenches every day, and your restaurants and your daycares and your churches that you work with are obviously calling you guys, I'm sure, for answers. You mentioned, and I said as well, we are in uncharted waters. Leadership is all about going somewhere first and providing some information and leadership, but this is brand new for all of us. Yeah. But you guys are daily having conversations and questions, and so bring us into some of those conversations. What are those questions, and what are you being asked?
Yeah, it's crazy. We sit here in July, and so it is feels like we've been in this season for a while, but it's only been about 4 months. So depending on the state that you're living and that kind of thing, each of us are kind of experiencing state-released guidances, and some of those things change, again, whether you're receiving it from a federal level, state, local, and so while it may seem to me and to us like we've been walking through this every day for 4 months, some of these guys are reopening their facilities for the first time. Some of these restaurants, churches, daycares are just beginning the journey to reopen, whether they were waiting for a certain phase from their governor, whether they are just for their own, well-being, safe practice, and so forth, waiting a little while longer. Perhaps they're reopening their facility in stages, and so they're bringing in partial populations and that kind of thing. So from that standpoint, a lot of my daily conversations tend to be ones that maybe we've been having as a community for weeks, if not months. Things like, where do you get your guidance from? So what I generally refer people to, because I am learning these daily guidances just like everybody else. So when the president speaks, or whether from the CDC, or whether from your governor, those things literally, I think I can have a good idea of where they want us to go. That, for instance, masks are just kind of recommended, and then all of a sudden they're required, and that changed overnight. And so it's some of those kind of conversations that we're walking through. So when it comes to, speaking to official policy, setting up procedure, that kind of thing, I always refer folks to those guidance first, while I am in the trenches, and we can help you navigate some of those things. We are looking to, again, the federal level, the state level, to help provide where our starting point needs to be, and then we can figure out how that applies to each individual locally. Other questions that we get are, we work with a customer base that's relatively broad. Everyone needs to clean their facility. So whether you are a restaurant, whether you're a church or a daycare, we try to tell our folks, over-communicate. In this day that we live in, man, we have so many modes of communication, whether that's social media, blast emailing, people talking in person, though that seems to be almost foreign these days. We try to tell folks to over-communicate, both internally to their own staffs, to their own volunteers, but also to their customer base or the children that they're welcoming in, or parents, or their attendees. And so, again, social media, emails, short video clips are great ways to do that. And then just establishing those chains of communication. But other questions that we receive go to real policy stuff, social distancing, ways to establish a number of people within that facility. So, hey, I'm reopening my daycare, and I don't want to have all 50 kids in at once. What's the best way that we should reopen? How can we set some of that? And so a lot of that's very local. A lot of that's very specific to the type of facility. And then other questions come in on how to arrange seating, how many tables to set in a dining room, who should wear masks, when should they wear masks. Unfortunately, some of this PPE, personal protection equipment, some of the, guidances that we have received, unfortunately, they've become very political. And so it's tough at times to know, hey, should I wear a mask? Well, some people say I should and some I shouldn't. And so we try to offer our best, guidance in that way. And then, again, other things, classroom safety, churches, schools, daycares. So where I tend to try to guide folks is establish the policy based on guidance that you're given, both from government agencies, but also, companies like ours looking to help you sanitize and be safe. But then you have to make it your own, depending on your size of facility.
So obviously our facilities have to change. I mean, there's a little bit, they don't look the same. We're sitting in a big auditorium today. And you just talked about capacity, and there's different restrictions and laws depending on maybe even some counties, but definitely states. Yeah. So what are some of those, so if we take what we're accustomed to, what our facilities look like, maybe what we're offering either our customers or even for our churches, what ministries are we providing, and what, how do we communicate the gospel, right? So in some of those conversations, I'm sure you're having all these conversations. What are some of those non-essential functions, if you will, that you're kind of talking and leading them through to? What are some of those things we can kind of take away to create a more safer environment, if you will?
Yeah, it's crazy when we start talking about essential functions and non-essential functions. I mean, unfortunately, we've got governments and media outlets labeling people and jobs as essential and non-essential, and how do we stay safe? And yeah, I mean, that gets tough, and that does range quite a bit depending on the type of facility that we're talking about. So whether that's a church or a restaurant or a school or a country club, say, it just kind of depends on the goal of that facility, what they are setting out to achieve, maybe what their local governance is requiring them to do. And so a lot of what we try to help our customers do is help their customer base. So in the case of restaurants, or again, whether it's a daycare, help the folks that are coming into their facility feel safe. So much of what this is, this pandemic time, a lot of what is being encouraged, whether that's wearing masks, whether that's the types of sanitizing that you're doing, the types of products that you're doing, a lot of that is geared toward actual safety, right? Killing the virus if it's on surfaces, wearing the mask such that you don't spread it through the air and that kind of thing. So that's definitely a very large component. But another component of it is helping people that walk through the doors feel like you as a church pastor, a restaurant owner, a daycare worker are going to put the practices in place to have my student or my elementary age son that's coming to Sunday school be and feel safe. And so when it comes to non-essential things, what we start talking through is some of the stuff that you've had that dresses up the room or it makes people feel more welcome. Let's take churches specifically. A lot of times folks will congregate kind of in an atrium or a hallway around a coffee station. And unfortunately, we're not really in the season for that. There are a lot of restaurants out there that self-service or counter service is a popular way of getting your food or getting your drink. And so a lot of those restaurants have had to pivot and move to, whereas normally you would walk up to the counter and you would order and receive your food, now you're having to have a wait staff member or somebody bring it out to you, or perhaps it's not in a open air dish. We also, our company works through to-go and disposable type for restaurants, and even daycares and churches where you need to move food from one facility to another. Obviously, we know that delivery services and some of that are huge these days. And so those are the kinds of pivots that, do you have to be serving in an open air dish, or can you serve in something that's closed, take it to your seat, that kind of thing. Other areas are books, so even including menus to some degree, whether you're used to passing out sort of laminated, very well-produced menus, or if you're handing out paper because you can't have that back, you don't have a great way to sanitize. So some of those are just some of the non-essential, like how can we think through operational parts of our day, and then how can we shift that a bit to make it feel safer?
So let's focus in and narrow in a little bit on just church itself. Okay. So let's get a little bit more practical and focus in on just that particular client, if you will, of who you guys serve.
Okay.
And so when you think about a church, what they have, what's some of the things, just to be very practical, if they can, let's just call them out. What are some things that they can kind of somewhat remove to keep and have that safe environment?
Yeah, so quite honestly, if we're speaking specifically to churches, but really more broadly in a lot of different types of facilities, part of feeling safe are things that you take away. Part of feeling safe are things that you add. So I'm sure that everybody, by this point, no matter what type of facility you walk into, whether it's a shopping facility, a church, a daycare, you're going to walk in, you're going to be greeted by some hand sanitizer. That's just kind of the world we live in. It may be the world we live in for quite some time. So that's an example of an addition. Again, speaking back to the churches, things like hymnals, common books that are used, common Bibles that are used, those things are tough to sanitize, whether between services or tough to sanitize between, week to week, being paper, that kind of thing. You may think through not doing that, obviously encouraging folks to move. And a lot of folks have moved to screen-based lyrics for songs, or electronic-based for referencing scripture and that kind of thing. But as opposed to where that was a preference, as opposed to where churches have offered, pew and chair-based Bibles and hymnals and that kind of thing. Those are the things where people are really beginning to pivot away from and start encouraging things that, again, most of us have used in a common way, but now it's becoming more of a requirement.
That's good. Or what are some other things that some of your organizations are doing as far as when people are entering into the facilities? And again, these may be things that we hear, but again, someone who gets calls every day, what are, again, some of those questions of what do we do when people are actually entering into our facilities, and what's another way that we can help with the crowds that we're serving?
Yeah, so, getting back to a couple of the points that we've hit on, over-communicating to your population. So whether you're a church, you've got to get word out to the folks that are going to be attending. If you have room restrictions, attendance restrictions, if you're a restaurant or a daycare, you've got to get whether emails or other ways of communicating besides in person. I've even have facilities that are small enough that are just using blast phone calls, so just making sure they reach each individual student or each individual parent, making sure that they're aware of the in-house restrictions, if you will. And so those procedures are geared toward making folks feel safe, adding the hand sanitizers. Other things, what you can begin to do in your facility to help people feel safe and be safe, are the optics of it all, which is making sure your staff wears masks. So I live in North Carolina. Our governor has put out a state mandate on wearing masks. And so, again, whether you agree with it or not, right now that's what our governor is telling us is the safest way to move about in public. And so as a representative of a company, but more importantly, if on the church side or the restaurant side, as a representative of that establishment, you want to do your best to honor the guidance that we're being given, and also the folks that are coming through your doors. But then again, we have to rely on what logic tells us too, right? The coronavirus is not the first sickness or virus or anything that's affected our community. We've had these through the years. Obviously, we faced the flu and a cold and just various things where, to a degree, distancing is always great. I'm a fist bump guy anyway, so to fist bump rather than shaking hands has kind of been natural to me. I wash my hands a lot more these days, so those are things that we encourage. I have a trouble encouraging my 8 and 4-year-old to do that, right? But these days, it's just so important.
So you guys are distributors. You obviously have some of these PPE products. Man, the gamut runs, it's so wide out there, and there's so many different things. And actually, I was having a conversation with someone today, and they showed me their mask, and he was like, man, we ran a test on this thing and actually sprayed Windex, and you could feel it on the whole other side of the mask. And so there's so many different products out there. Obviously, you guys, if you put your name on the products in which you've done a lot of research, and you've done your due diligence, and you've looked into it. And so bring us into that conversation and some of that research that you found. What are some of the maybe some products you want to stay away from, or just a misconception of some of the products that exist, and what are some you want to kind of look into, if you will?
Yeah. So, let's start with the PPE side. So what I would say is what we have found through the pandemic, and I think I speak broadly, but what our company has found, there are certain instances where health departments and others require restaurants, say, that certain staff in restaurants have to wear gloves. So in those cases, you need to find some gloves, disposable gloves that you can wear. But what I have found more broadly than that is washing your hands is truly the best way to keep yourself and others clean. So when it comes to personal protective equipment, what I would say is your hand soaps are the way to go over gloves. If you have a choice, right? If your place of work or your government isn't requiring something of you, the best way to kind of keep your hands clean is by washing them, not covering them. So also masks, right? So unfortunately, again, masks is something that has been quite the point of contention when it comes to from a political side. It's also been a bit of a point from a practical side, right? When all this first started coming out, the buzzword was N95 masks, which are manufactured to a certain standard. Others in that line of masks restrict, I believe it's outgoing. You mentioned the Windex coming right through, right? And till we come to today, where we literally have very cheap, either disposable. Some folks wear, I believe they're called the gaiters that kind of come up over your neck and your face. Some folks have cloth or otherwise homemade masks. All of these vary from a level of what they let in and what they let out. However, our government and guidance still continues to say that wearing masks makes us safer as a society than not. So our company has looked into, we do provide disposable masks for any place that would need to require them. Obviously in North Carolina, again, I mentioned, we are required to be out in public that you wear a mask. And so we provide those to our restaurants and our country clubs and our churches, that if someone were to show up to come to church and they don't have a mask, that the church can purchase those masks just to have kind of on the side if they need to make sure that their people have access to that. Beyond PPE, obviously you have procedures and ways that you are cleaning. And you mentioned reaching across the gamut. I'm not sure how much time we have here, but we can talk through all types of cleaning procedures, whether your facility hires out those cleaning, a service to come in and to clean, whether you're using your own volunteers or your own staff to clean. Our company produces as well as provides guidance on all types of sanitizers, whether chlorine-based, which is a popular one, bleach. That's one that's out there anywhere and everywhere, very cheap, very accessible. There's specific CDC guidance on chlorine. But then there's other types of sanitizers. There is BAC hand sanitizer. There is a quat-based spray sanitizer for surfaces and so forth. And so not to get too deep into those, we can do that maybe at another time. But those types of cleaners, those types of sanitizers, there's a place and a purpose for each of them. And that's where we come in to kind of help provide that guidance, to help provide that education, if as it were, to help folks, make the best decision on what type of procedure and then what type of product they're going to have in their facility.
Yeah, so you touched on something I'd like for you to expand a little bit more. You talked about either high-end or service, or kind of doing it yourself. And in this time, we've seen some new cleaning agents that have kind of hit the market. I don't know if I've heard the electrostatic sprayers and all of this different stuff that's kind of hit. I'm sure you guys have researched some of that, and I don't know, maybe you distribute some of those products. I'm not sure, but if you will, take us in, like, when is it good, or the pros and cons, if you will, of hiring, of doing it yourself, and what are, if you do it yourself, some of those newer pieces of equipment that you found to be pretty successful?
Yeah, so what I would encourage there is that's a great starting point, right? So are you going to bring in hired professionals, or are you going to do it yourself, whether with volunteer staff or your own hired staff? So once you kind of make that direction, that choice in that direction, obviously if you're choosing to hire someone in that way, you're going to rely on them, that they've done their research. If you're going to partner with Davidson Supply, we have the cleaning products as well as tools, guidance, education tools, and so forth to help guide you along the way on making the right decisions for what best fits your facility. But then if you decide to choose to do it yourself, again, we can come partner along with you to help you make good decisions there, but it'll be up to you to set policy, procedure, ways that are cleaned. If we're talking about churches, obviously church buildings are filed into certainly once a week, maybe twice a week still these days. There's midweek gatherings and that kind of thing. And so how are we going to handle each gathering in the facility? How are we going to handle it just after everyone leaves? How are we going to handle it when before folks come back through the door? Some of those tools, again, Davidson Supply, we can be your partner for anything that you would need to clean, sanitize, from towels to sanitizers, just standard cleaners, that kind of thing. But some specific areas, let's take hand sanitizer, for instance. Unfortunately, the demand that became for hand sanitizer over the last several months has far exceeded all of your traditional routes of hand sanitizer, right? You can probably think of some of the ones. Purell is a great one. Bath and Body Works, right, for the ladies out there. There's ways to get...
Getting your promotional check for those?
Totally am.
Okay, cool.
It's something that's going to come my way, I'm sure. But since then, you've had all kinds of folks that know how to try to mix chemicals, or in some cases, there are stills out there, breweries that have, kind of put together a formula that they can produce these things. And, is it altogether bad? It's certainly not. There's a demand, there's a need to try to sanitize hands, now more than ever. However, what we're finding kind of now that we've walked through this for some months, some of those hand sanitizers are being recalled based on the products that were used to make them. And then that's a little bit scary, right? So many decisions right now are being made in a snap judgment way that we think that are helping folks or trying to sanitize hands where, down the line it may not be. So I would encourage you and allow a company like ours, a person like myself, to come in and talk to you about the differences between an alcohol-based, say, hand sanitizer, and one that is a BAC base that's not alcohol, it's not flammable, it won't irritate. There are things like that. You mentioned the electrostatic sprayers. That is a new technology that basically is a disbursement tool for sanitizer to sanitize large facilities, right? So if you're a sports complex, if you're a church, if you need to sanitize a large room, these sprayers will put a mist out all over the room. They actually charge the water particles and sanitizer such that they are attracted to surfaces and then sanitize them. Again, the specifics of it, the science of it, we can get into maybe off camera, or if you reach out to Davidson Supply. There are others, and not to get, again, too scientific, but it's called an atomizer. And basically it's a big fan that you put the solution into, and the fan saturates the air in the room. Once that is then allowed to settle, it falls down and sanitizes the room. So, when you're talking about sanitizing, say, a classroom, that's relatively easy with a couple people, a couple staff, maybe some volunteers. But if you're looking to sanitize a room that we're sitting in today, a couple people with some sponges are going to have a hard time cleaning this in any kind of effective manner. And that's where you need to look into some of these newer ways, newer products and so forth that can help you sanitize on a bigger level.
Yeah, that's good. So before we came out and started this session here, you and I were talking a little bit about, you were telling me about a scenario, and I'd love for you to share with our audience here as we close here. But you were telling me about a daycare that had reached out to you and was talking about cleaning. And one of the things that this person mentioned was, we actually teach our students or our kids to help. And so they have little services that they do and little jobs that they do, which they really enjoy doing. And if you don't mind, bring our audience into that conversation and kind of tell us a little bit of that dialogue and kind of what you recommended for them, because that's not something we really want to take away, right? And it's something that I feel like in this season, a lot of us feel like we have to take so many different things away. But do we really have to take everything away? And I don't think the answer to that question is yes. I think it's no. But bring us into that if you don't mind, share that, because I just thought it was so good.
Yeah. I think, from a personal standpoint, I think so much of what's happening right now is encouraging us to be separate, right? Is to be in our homes, is to not go to church and not go to the store, and we're so isolated to some degree. That I loved this story when it was a daycare reached out, and they were saying how they are taking more of a community approach, more of a team approach, where not only is their full staff getting on board, but they're asking even some of their parents, but more importantly, some of the students. And this is a daycare, right? These are not 10, 11, 12-year-old kids. These are 3, 4, and they're giving them jobs, which is fantastic for education, their development, that kind of thing. But they were asking, what is the most effective way? Should we have them wear gloves? It's tough for me to say no to that for sure, but no, have them wash their hands. What are the best types of soap that won't, that will be safe for kids? But the biggest question that they had was the type of hand sanitizer that they were using and the best ways to clean their surfaces, so their chairs, their tabletops, and that kind of thing. And what they had was an alcohol-based hand sanitizer and a chlorine-based cleaner. And they were asking, hey, can we get our students on board with this? And, can you? I mean, sure, with the proper guidance, with the proper supervision. But a safer way to go about that would be to get a non-alcohol-based hand sanitizer. And again, I encourage you to do your research there on what the best ones are for you. There are arguments to be made on both sides, but someone like myself, Davidson Supply, we can help walk you through the pros and cons of the different types of sanitizers. But then for their tabletops, we recommended a quat-based sanitizer that is far less corrosive, far less get on your skin or in your eyes, and it'll hurt or burn or that kind of thing. And so we encourage them in that way to kind of make a slight pivot. You really don't have to change procedure too much. Still very easy to teach a 4-year-old, but much safer for them. And they get to be a part of the solution as opposed to kept in their homes.
That's good. Hey, Jordan, we can't thank you enough for your time that you would just come and spend and give some of the knowledge and bring us into some of the conversations that you guys are having. So thank you so much, and please thank you, your team. I know you have a great team around you at Davis Supply. None of this do it alone. And so, again, thanks for your time. And we really hope you enjoyed this session. We hope you took some things away. We got a session 2 coming where we're going to be talking to Mr. Steve Dobie with J.H. Batten, and we're going to talk about what our environments look like when they're touchless. So we hope you stay tuned for session 2, and thanks so much for joining us.